dreamy Juniata, gazing at the water to see the fish at play, drifting on the dreamy Juniata. Here in my canoe, nothing much to do, listen to the birds and admire the view. Come to Pennsylvania and spend a summer day. Once you feel the magic, you'll just want to stay, drifting on the dreamy Juniata.
Hello, everyone. That beautiful tune is obviously Juniata, and it's by our guest tonight, Jonathan Jensen. The dance is Juniata. The choreographer is Sharon Green. The musicians are John Berger, Jonathan Jensen, Shira Kamen, Rebecca King. The CD is Dances from the Greenery, and you can buy it from the Country Dance and Song Society bookstore. We are posting it now. It's nice to have everyone with us. I am Darlene Hamilton, and we are the Historical Tea and Dance Society on our team, we have Lindsay Verbal. And in monitoring Facebook, we have Larry Hansen, looking very dapper in his picture. Hi, Larry. And we have Reed Wilson monitoring in Zoom. And hi. And everybody's so important to us. Reed and Larry are scanning the comment section for questions we can ask. Please feel free to ask questions. We just love that part. It makes it very interactive. And so don't be shy. And Lindsay is helping us with media and dealing with audience questions. And yeah, and that's what makes this all happen. So let me go into a description of what's happening. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm watching chats. Oh, let me not fail to say thank you to Karen Axelrod for her concert every Tuesday. We just love it. It makes Tuesday wonderful, and there were some amazing tunes, and I really enjoyed it today. As always, of course. Stick around for the after talk posted on the Historical Tea and Dance Friends page or in the registration email down at the bottom. You will have found it there. We will be posting it in our chat later on in this hour, so pay attention to that. Let's see. We're fiddling with some things in the background. I think we all work out okay now, right? I'm going to go into a bio about our guest tonight. Jonathan Jensen is an inspired pianist in a range of musical styles, from English country dance to contra to ragtime and jazz. Oh, wait till you hear some of the stuff he's going to play tonight. He plays in bands Reunion and Taylor Among the Devils, and can be heard on many English country dance CDs, including Dances from the Greenery, Old Friends, Celebrations, playing not just piano, but also mandolin, recorders, whistles, ukulele, crumhorn. I want to see what that one looks like, and ocarina. He's composed a wealth of English country dance tunes, with many in Barnes 3. He'll mention that later. His compositions include After Dinner Maggot, The Homecoming, Devil's Maggot, and two of everyone's all-time favorites, Emma Turns 3 and Candles in the Dark. He performs at balls and dance camps around the country and was scheduled to be on the staff at HTDS this past summer, so hopefully he'll be there next year when we're all there. Jonathan is also a songwriter and a lyricist, and his parodies and satirical songs have a rapidly growing following on Facebook and YouTube, which we'll mention that later on. In his daily life, Jonathan plays bass for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, which has performed many of his orchestral arrangements, and he plays mandola with the Baltimore Mandolin Quartet. Please welcome the fabulous Jonathan Jensen. You can pop in anytime now. The curtain call. I think he's there someplace. Jonathan. There he is. Oh, there he was. In Magic Show. Hi, Jonathan. We're so happy to have you with us tonight. Okay, yes, and we're just going to jump right into these 5 things. So first, let me hold up the magic card. Thing number 1, musical journey.
Okay, so my first memory of any kind, I will reproduce it for you right now. Would you like to go with Teddy Bear and see? Would you like to go with Teddy Bear and see? Yes, that was my first composition at age 4, and that was the very toy piano that I banged on to sing it. And so I had this music in my blood, and it took a while to develop it in the various directions that I have. I don't know if I can say that I grew up in a house full of music, but we had a record player. The radio was always on. If I heard the popular songs and Frank Sinatra and so forth. My mom sang and played piano and did the songs from the Great American Songbook, so I grew up with that. my older brother, at the age of 12, bought an old Victrola, a stack of 78 RPM records. So I became familiar with music from the early part of the century. And we all took piano lessons. And my brothers and I, we all made up tunes. We all sang together, made up harmonies. So I guess there was a lot of music going on in the house. Now, as soon as I started taking piano lessons at the age of 7, I began making up my own tunes and spending as much time doing that as I did practicing my pieces, which kind of carried on throughout my time taking lessons. And we have the original manuscript of an early piece here, which I think we're about to see. It's the March. Here we are, March of the Teddy Bears, completely with illustrations. I didn't quite have couldn't quite notate the rhythms the way they're supposed to go. But anyway, that was one of the few tunes that was actually written out. Most of my tunes and songs that I made up at an early age were just in my head. And I did write mostly songs. And the first hit song I had, this took the elementary school by storm. This is called Old Rubber Rat. I'll play a little bit of that. Old rubber rat in my garden, and he's chewing it all up to shreds. Yeah, 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 old rubber rat in my garden. Oh no, my taters are dead. So, I was writing mostly songs at this point. I was attracted to words. I wrote little poems. I wrote songs with words. I wrote stories. At one point, I thought maybe I would become a writer because I was so much into words. This was during the time of the Great Folk Scare, which some of you may remember. In the early 60s, folk music suddenly became hip, and you could hear it on the radio. And my mom always liked to be on top of the trends. So she had to get a ukulele so she could learn some chords and strum along. So she learned the ukulele, and then she had to get a banjo. So then I took the ukulele and learned the ukulele chords. And then my brother got a guitar and took guitar lessons. And then we eventually got a baritone ukulele. So we started having hootenannies on the back patio with the neighbors over. And this was my first experience with fretted instruments, which I've played all my life, and the experience of learning to accompany, learning a lot of standard folk songs, playing by ear, learning chords, knowing which chords go to what. So that was a very important step in my development. I taught myself to play a recorder. In fact, I remember the whole family was going to see the Sound of Music movie, and I stayed home to practice the recorder. How nerdy is that? So the recorder got me into an interest in early music, and besides that, I was taken to see Broadway musicals. So there was all these different threads coming together, taking in all these different kinds of sounds. Now the bass came along. It was kind of by accident. I was in an elementary school. I was in 6th grade. They had a bass in the band room and nobody was playing it. And the principal knew that I was a good musician. I'm sure he'd heard Old Rubber Rat at least once. And he suggested to my father that I should take the bass home and learn to play it. So we had the band director show me how to tune it and kind of where the notes were. And that was it. I was on my own for 2 or 3 years. But that was good enough on it to get in the Montgomery County Youth Orchestra, at first the Junior Youth Orchestra. And we have a photo here from my first year playing the bass. And you can see I hadn't quite grown into the instrument yet. And my stance was not exactly textbook.
Jonathan, can I ask you, where did you grow up?
Oh yes, I meant to mention that Silver Spring, right outside of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County. So it was close enough to the city where there were, all kinds of cultural attractions, and had good schools with music programs. Every kid that I knew of, was taking piano and studying an instrument. Even our church had an orchestra. So it was a good time and place for a musician to grow up. Now, at one point, the Montgomery County Youth Orchestra went on a tour to Europe, and I went into a music store in Vienna and saw this in a display case. I'd never seen anything like this, and picked it up and figured out how to play it, and thus was begun my ocarina collection. So this is something that would come in handy much later when I started playing for dances. So I became more serious about the bass. I actually started taking lessons with a player in the Washington National Symphony. Started going to the National Symphony concerts regularly. I was playing in the youth orchestra, so I was playing orchestra music, hearing orchestral music, learning to play, and I was just taking with the whole sound and the repertoire of the orchestra and the part that the bass played, being part of this fantastic. Yes, here I am at my first job. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. You can bring that up a little later, or I can tell you about this now. Anyway, so I had decided on an orchestral career, and I had heard about the Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan, and this is a place to go if you're really serious about being an artist, an actor, dancer, musician. I was lucky enough to get into that. And then instead of having orchestra once a week, I had orchestra rehearsals every day, lessons, chamber music, everything. So my last 2 years of high school were at Interlochen, and then I went to Northwestern University music school, and I became, of course, more and more into. It was pretty serious, you know. When you're a bass major, you have a lot of material to get through. But I got sidetracked when Joshua Rifkin released his record of Scott Joplin Rags, and that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd never heard. I knew what honky tonk and ragtime sounded like, kind of, but classic rag like that, the melody and the beauty of that. So I immediately started writing piano rags, and I have about 10 of those that I've written over the years. And I was playing ragtime, and that became a distraction from practicing the bass. I would be over in the building where the piano practice rooms were, and messing around with ragtime. But in spite of that, I got good enough on the bass um, that I eventually got a job in the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra in the wilds, in the middle of Western Canada. And now you can bring up that photo, which is from my first year in the Winnipeg Symphony, and you can probably pick me out. I'm the really skinny guy. Do we have that photo?
It's coming.
Okay, there we go. So I am fourth from left there. Yeah, I would never be that skinny again. Um, the guy to my the guy left of me was also a bass major at Northwestern, and they hired both of us. There was only one opening, but they decided they liked both of us, so that was good. So anyway, so I was in the Winnipeg Symphony for 8 years, and and then I really had to. I knew I didn't want to stay in Winnipeg, although it was a good first job. I made friends. Um, so I was practicing constantly, taking auditions to get that next job. And during the summers, I would be in Chicago because the Winnipeg Symphony, the season was only 32 weeks. So I got a job in a summer orchestra in Chicago, the Grant Park Orchestra. And so that meant that in the summer, I was in the huge city of Chicago. They had folk clubs and coffee houses. So that was another exposure to folk music. Also in Winnipeg, I fell in with a bunch of a ragtag bunch of folk musicians who were all woodworkers who would have jam sessions in the basement of their shop. And that's where I learned sea shanties, old ballads, drinking songs, a lot of fiddle tunes. We had a sort of an ad hoc band called the Ten Penny Bit. and we would occasionally play gigs in bars for beer. And so this was a major part of my folk music development. Also, during my Winnipeg years, I actually got taken to an English country dance and saw it being done. I played one of the tunes on the recorder. No light bulbs went off, but it was something that it was like a foretaste of what was to come. And so after a lot of practicing, I eventually did land my dream job in the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra on my third try. I've been there now for 36 seasons, and I believe there might be a photo, or maybe not, of there I am on tour in Ireland a couple summers ago. So this is this is really my career. This is the major part of my life, but somehow I've managed to squeeze in this other kind of music. So I feel very blessed. Now I have to tell you, before we move on, the first thing I said when they told me I had won the job in Baltimore, I didn't say, "That's fantastic." I said, "Did I mention I also play piano?" So that leads us to the
I love that. All right, we're moving on with that to thing number 2, a second career. And we're so glad he has it.
So now that I had a dream job, I didn't have to spend 4 hours a day practicing. So I had more time to rekindle other interests and explore other kinds of music. Now, not long after I got there, I met a violinist in the orchestra named Wayne Taylor. He played fiddle tunes. He also played banjo and mandolin, and he and his wife Marty played folk music together. And he saw that I could play some other kinds of music, and he suggested, "Why don't we form a trio, and we could get dance gigs?" So our first English country dance was in January of 1984. At that time, the repertoire was pretty much Playford tunes out of a green book that had piano arrangements, and there were a few other collections coming out in little paperback books. So you had to have all these little, like the Fall of Broom and so forth. There was very little new repertoire, but it was just starting to. There was a bit of creative ferment going on, but it was a tight knit group. We would dance on Thursday evenings and go out for pizza afterwards. And it was a great, I felt very at home in the genre because it drew on my classical training. Most of the tunes sounded classical and Baroque, but it also required that you be able to improvise, do variations on the tunes, and just be able to make things up, which I was an old hand at. So it was a very good fit for me. And soon after that, we started playing contra dances and had to learn still more fiddle tunes. And we played in places like Glen Echo and DC and other sort of places. So we continued playing English country dance. Eventually, we played the annual ball, the Playford Ball. I think there's a photo there, perhaps of our first ball. And I don't know if I mentioned, we were called Devil Among the Tailors. So that's Wayne and Marty Taylor and myself. Of course, Devil Among the Tailors is the name of an old fiddle tune. So this is us after probably the 1987 Playford Ball in Baltimore. And since there weren't a whole lot of musicians they're specializing in English country dance, we got called to do all kinds of out-of-town jobs, workshops in New York City with Christine Helwig, balls in New York, Richmond, and Williamsburg, and so forth. Now, around about this time, I taught myself orchestration, and one of the first things I wrote was a Playford Suite, which was a setting of several of these tunes. Jenny Pluck Pears, Rufty Tufty, Parson's Farewell, Never Love Thee More, and Mr. Isaac's Maggot. So that was another way to have fun with these beautiful tunes. Now, in 1988, the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, the musicians went on strike, and I wrote a parody of the song Mr. Sandman. It was addressed to the CEO and president of the Baltimore Symphony, and it went like this. Mr. Mr. Gitwit, make us a deal. Give us a contract that has more appeal. We've waited so long, it's driving us batty. Don't we deserve as much as Cincinnati? So we recorded this in harmony, and somehow this got on the radio. I think it was the BSO board was not pleased. And it was also used on the hotline that you could call in to hear the latest news about the strike that the musicians had set up. And a writer, a music critic at the Baltimore Sun, did a little write-up about me and this song and how I had introduced some levity into a very stressful situation. Now, one of the regular dancers at our Baltimore dance, her name was Lynn Williams. She was a writer for the Baltimore Sun. She saw this piece, and I don't know if I'd ever even spoken to her. I was very shy in those days. And so at the next dance, she came over to me and started talking to me about this article. And it turns out that they had been on strike, the Baltimore Sun writers, the previous summer, and we had a lot to talk about. And the more we talked, the more I, felt this, the good vibrations, as the song goes, and we felt this mutual attraction. And at the intermission, somebody sat down at the piano and started playing Amelia's Waltz, and she motioned me onto the floor, like, let's see what you're made of. And so I managed to stumble through a waltz with her, and I got this little hug at the end that made me realize that we were an item, that we were clicking, and it was clear sailing now. So I passed that test. I still can hardly waltz, but I guess I did well enough when it counted. So we continued dating, and I got a local dancer, Rich Galloway, to write a dance to a tune of mine that I called Lady Williams' Delight. It goes like this. Actually, I think oh yes, that was not even the first original tune that I wrote for English country dance. The first one was a few years earlier, and that was called Devil's Maggot, and that was the choreography was by by one of our callers, Diane Schmidt. And here's the A part. So no great shakes, but you can tell that's an English country dance tune. What else could it be? So anyway, this is just to mention that I was just beginning to write tunes with members of of our community. And then in April of 1990, Lynn and I were married. And that summer, Devil Among the Tailors was hired to play at English American Week. And then a few years later, 1994, I came back to Pinewoods as a single, playing piano for an English Week, and I met some fabulous musicians that I still enjoy playing with. And that began several summers, like ever since then. There's hardly been a summer that I haven't been at a camp or something. But most importantly, Helena Cornelius and Marshall Barron, who are on staff there, independently wrote to Gary Rudman and said, I think you should write dances to Jonathan's tunes. And I got this letter from Gary, dated August 28th, 1994, Binghamton, New York. Dear Jonathan, on 2 successive days, I received notes from 2 friends suggesting that I contact you. A note from Helena Cornelius came on Wednesday, and one from Marshall Barron on Thursday. Both praised your abilities as a writer of dance tunes and suggested that I might work with you to create English dances to your tunes. I would like to do that very much. So, a new phase of my English country dance career had begun.
And that leads right into thing number 3, collaborations.
So with Gary, he just wanted me to send him tunes. He didn't have like preconceived ideas, or I want something that's like this, or I just sent him whatever tunes I came up with. And in those days, that meant recording it on a cassette and sticking it in an envelope. I'm so glad I can put things on an MP3 and email them today. And he seemed to like what I sent him. Now, the first tune I sent him was something that I had made up while we were on Cape Cod, which I called Road to the Cape. And he wrote a dance called The Matching Pair. Now, no one has ever danced to this. I'm convinced that, I mean, maybe someone has. It has never come up in all of my playing. So maybe in the after talk, someone can say, "Oh, I love that one," or "We danced to that one." But I sort of had the feeling that our first one was not, like World Shaking, our first collaboration. But we continued doing several, and a few of them would pop up on programs. And then I would say our first actual hit was The Homecoming. And a few years after we wrote this, it was included in a Pinewoods class, which was like dedicated to what we thought would be the classics of the future, dances we would be doing in 300 years, and The Homecoming was one of them. So I felt like, yes. So now we're there with Playford. We're in the canon, and I particularly enjoy watching this one being danced, as the moves go so well with the music. Now, one of the few times that Gary had any specifications for me for a tune was when we were both at Dartington Manor together in England. It was an English country dance week, and he was working on Emma Turns 3. He wanted a tune in the style of Walpole Cottage, which goes... So I thought, okay, what do I use from that tune? What is the essence of that tune? So I took that interval and reversed it, and it came up with... So he mentioned this at lunch, and at dinner I had the tune for him. So that was fun, writing a tune to specifications. The one tune was written at his house. We were traveling around New England after being at dance camp, Lynn and our daughter Fiona and I, and we were invited to stay with them, and they had us for dinner. And Gary asked if I had any tunes with conviction, I think is the word he used. And I already had the beginning of something in my head, and I thought about it some more, and then came up with something that he just called After Dinner Maggot. Another dinner-themed tune came later. It was Whiskey Before Dinner. This was inspired by a gathering that would happen every day. This is in the Mendocino Woodlands at the Mendocino English Week in 2005. Cabin 17 had quite an array of whiskeys and other drinkables, and people would have a little cocktail party before dinner. And I knew there was a tune called Whiskey Before Breakfast, so I wrote Whiskey Before Dinner. Only one time I remember Gary asking me to revise or tweak a tune I'd already written. This was Christine, which I wrote when I heard of Christine Hellwig's passing. He wanted the B part to have more delineation, like to be more a bigger arrival, to stand out more. And I changed it around, and it made all the difference. And I think Gary has just great musical instincts, and besides knowing what to do with the music as far as the dance. So we've continued working together, and we have at least 32 dances, I believe, that we've collaborated on, some for camp auctions that we've offered. Recently, he resurrected a couple of tunes from a cassette I sent him in 1995 that he never got around to, and he finally, 25 years later, came up with tunes for that. And as mentioned, I played on a couple of CDs of his dances. I've also written dances with my wife, Lynn, and one of our first ones was the Wedding Ring Waltz for the wedding of Barbara Greenberg and Dan Beerbaum. This made it into Barnes book #2, which I was thrilled about. We've written dances together to honor members of our local dance community. One of these that's maybe familiar is Mike's Health, which was for Mike's Franch's 70th birthday. This is in Barnes 3 and mini ball programs. In 2002, Orly Krasner was commissioned to write a dance for someone's 10th anniversary. So I wrote a tune. She asked me to write the tune, and I wrote a tune with a 10-bar A and a 10-bar B part. I was paid in beer at the time. My price has gone up a little bit. Now I ask for a nice bottle of whiskey, just so you know. Later, she asked me for a tune to a dance she was going to call Heartland, and it was for Nikki Herbst, who lives in Iowa. She wanted something to evoke the wide open spaces, the Great Plains, and here's the beginning of it. So this very gentle tune was written while dashing around New York one summer when our daughter was taking a summer course for high schoolers at the Parsons School of Design. And it was kind of like, you always wonder how Aaron Copland, someone from Brooklyn, could write those beautiful evocations of the American West and cowboys. But I think it's, you just go into your imagination, you tune out where you are, and you'd be amazed at what you can come up with. Philippe Callens is another choreographer I've worked with, met him at Pinewoods. I was especially honored to write the tune for his Golden Green, celebrating the 50th wedding anniversary of Sharon and David Green. Now, speaking of Sharon, she has become one of my most prolific collaborators, and this started in 2006 when she heard my Lilyhammer Waltz on the CD that Elka Baker had recorded years ago. It was the first tune of mine to make it onto a CD. That became Familiar Quotations. She likes to take tunes of mine that were not written at all intended for English country dance and put dances to them, including, of course, Easy and contented I pass the time away. And that became Juniata, of course. That song was written, that was inspired by our summer cottage on the Juniata River in Pennsylvania. Later, I wrote a driving reel during the Hurricane Sandy. It was called Wrath of Sandy. Not exactly, it doesn't exactly scream English country dance, but she heard it on Facebook, and next thing I know, she had a dance to it. So I played on the CD Dances from the Greenery, and we recorded the follow-up CD in the summer of 2019, and I'm not quite sure when that will be out. Let's see who else. Brooke Friendly and Chris Sackett have written a lot of dances together. They were the winning bidders for a tune that I offered at a dance camp. It took me forever to come up with anything or to send them anything, and I felt really bad about it. So when I finally ended up sending them a whole pile of tunes, like everything I'd written in 6 months, to make up for my procrastinating, and they used pretty much all of it. One of them is called Daybreak, and it was inspired by Chinese music I heard on the radio. The only one of my tunes that's in a pentatonic scale. Loretta Holtz, of course, many of you have danced to her dances. She did a beautiful dance to my Candles in the Dark. There are many videos of that one being done. including quite a few from Ukraine and Russia, which kind of baffles me. But someone explained that there was a dance teacher who went over there and introduced them to English country dance, and so they all do that, but they do it, beautiful dancing, beautiful costumes, recorded music, no live music. But it is nice to see that dance being done over there. Fried Herdman, I did sent her a few tunes. She had a habit of altering tunes, so that I was not spared that treatment, but that was fine. It's nice to have a free dance. Sharon McKinley in the Baltimore community, Bob Green in St. Louis, the late Saul Weber, Mary Devlin, Colin Hume, Nikki Herbst, probably some that I'm not remembering have all written dances to my tunes. My most unusual collaboration was a dance composed by committee. This is Mendocino Redwood. I was on staff, as I mentioned, at the English Week in Mendocino in 2005. I had a class off after lunch, so I decided to go for a hike. There was a giant redwood that everyone said you had to go see this monster tree, and there was a beautiful trail up to it. So I'm hiking along vigorously, and before I knew it, I had a tune going through my head, and I kept working on it, and tweaking it. When I got back from my afternoon class, which was for choreographers, I believe Gary was teaching it, I said, "Hey, everybody, I got a tune. Let's see if we can choreograph it." So the class broke up into 3 sets of 4 couples, and I would play the tune several times. They would move around, then they would confer with each other, and then play it a few more times, and they would go around and around, and everybody was doing something different. And finally, each group had their dance figured out, and the one that made it, I could see that they somehow had the essence of the tune, and it was not fussy and complicated. It just fit with the tune. And the dance we do today is by Beth Zeekley, Bob Fraley, and Mary Devlin. So that was kind of I should take more hikes, I think, because it's a good way to get inspired. So after all these years, I believe I'm up to 33 tunes in Barnes book number 3. But while I'm talking about collaborations, I should just mention briefly some of the musical collaborators that I've enjoyed over the years. Of course, Marty Taylor being the first. Wayne is no longer playing in the dance world. Steve Hickman has taken his place for contra dances, so we're now called Taylor Among the Devils. Of course, Barb Greenberg and Dan Bierbaum, we hit it off so well in when we met at Pinewoods that we immediately formed a band called Reunion, because every time we get together, which maybe once a year, it's a great reunion. Paul Orts in the DC area, wonderful mandolin, accordion player, guitar, all kinds of things. Elka Baker, fiddle, and when the 3 of us play together, we're called Trio Con Brio. And then quite a few musicians on the West Coast, Shira Kamen, John Berger, just to name a couple. And there is something special about those times when everything just clicks. The tune you're playing, the dancers, the caller, the musicians, everyone's on the same page, and you get this rush. And I have had this experience with all of these people and many more that I haven't mentioned. So that's part of the collaboration aspect of English country dance. I'm lucky to have the creative collaboration, but also the real-time collaboration with wonderful musicians and enthusiastic dancers. And I should just mention, final note, one thing that Dan Bierbaum and Paul Orts have in common, we'll be playing along, a nice flowing Baroque tune, and suddenly they'll put a little hitch in the rhythm, and you get a bounce to it, and the next thing you know, you're playing swing. And it's just the greatest thing. It's just irresistible. It creeps into their playing, and you never know what's going to happen, but when it takes off, look out.
It sounds fabulous. I want to be at one of those concerts or dances. Oh my gosh, let's move into thing number 4. What was that waltz you just played?
Okay, waltzes. That's the whole other genre. Um, I've actually been writing waltzes for 55 years. Okay. Um, we didn't have a lot of classical records when I grew up, but we did have one, the Boston Pops, that had a Strauss waltz and a Waldteufel waltz. Plus, my brother and his 78 records, there were a lot of waltzes in those old records. So I wrote a waltz at the age of 12 or so with words. It was called Uwina Dear. Now, Uwina is a made up girl's name, and I'll play a little bit of it. This song incorporated all of the Tin Pan Alley cliches or love songs for the past century, and I'll give you just a taste of this. Uwina, dear, you are divine, your lips as sweet as sparkling wine, your rosy cheeks so filled with love, and eyes like the stars above. So, well, you think a kid writing stuff like that would probably get beaten up by bullies, but I guess they didn't know what I was up to. So I would occasionally, in the midst of my composing and stuff over the years, would write waltz tunes. In 1981, it was one of the summers I was in Chicago, in the neighborhood called Rogers Park, and out of the blue came this tune, which I called the Rogers Park Waltz. I don't know where that came from. I wasn't playing for dances yet. I wasn't going to dances. It, it must have been something I heard. Um, it came from somewhere. It sounds like a cowboy waltz. But when I did start playing dances with the Taylors, that was one of Marty's favorites. And after all these years, it's still one of her favorites. So it was a foretaste of something that I was going to need later on. So when I started playing for dances, of course, every dance, whether it's a contour or English, ends with a waltz. So there's an incentive to write waltzes. Um, One of the first ones, Susan's Waltz, was much later choreographed and became Indian Summer, and that's by Elizabeth Goosens, who is in Winnipeg, part of that Winnipeg dance group. I've always enjoyed the freedom of when it's time to play the waltz. You get to pick the tune. There's no caller. It can be fast, slow. It can be. There's so many different styles, variations of style and tempo. And waltzes, playing and composing, draw on my knowledge of classical music. And there are jazz waltzes. There are, of course, the vintage waltzes, waltzes that are kind of inspired that might tie into world music, like Latin waltzes or Eastern European waltzes. So it's a fascinating, huge genre, and I've been writing waltzes for many years. This is my first collection of waltzes that I put out in 1994 when I'd been in the folk world, the dance world, for 10 years. I thought I would sort of mark the occasion by putting out this book called Waltz Around the Clock. And I'm just going to quote something from the foreword here. Playing in a dance band is a great incentive to compose. You can make up a jig, polka, or waltz during an idle moment, jot it down on paper, and have a room full of couples hopping, whirling, or stomping to it that very night. There's little or no need for rehearsing or arranging for your tune to come alive. And it only takes one dancer coming up to the stage to ask, "What was that waltz you just played?" to make your day.
Let me just ask you, Jonathan, really quickly, is that book still available? We forgot to check that out.
Oh, no, that's way, way out of print. I only have one copy of volume 1 and 2 myself. But I followed that up 10 years later with this collection, Candles in the Dark, which is mostly waltzes, other kinds of tunes. And then 10 years later, 2004, was this collection, um, which I don't actually, I'm not very good at keeping merchandise, on hand and hanging on to my originals. So I don't actually have, well, I could probably come up with something if somebody wanted one of these collections, but I'm not really good at the merchandising end of things. I would just mention there are many things that can inspire a waltz or a tune of any kind. Candles in the Dark was written when Hurricane Floyd knocked out the electricity, and we set candles all around the living room where the piano is. And I sat down at the piano and I felt like, I really need to encapsulate this atmosphere somehow. I'll just noodle around and see what happens. So what I played, looking at my sketchbook, this is how it came out. But then I erased a little bit and tweaked it until it was. And that's an example how a small change, at least to me, I think makes a big difference. It's a much more graceful line. And this is something I do with almost all of my tunes. I go back to something I thought was great and say, oh, you don't make that an A, that should be an F. That would make all the difference. Another tune, New Hampshire Nocturne, was written at night, on a starlit night in New Hampshire at Camp Ogontz. Maggie Grant, a dancer that some of you may know, she once described swimming by starlight in Long Pond, Pine Woods, looking up at stars, feeling like she was swimming among the stars. And she said, someday someone will write a waltz for me called Swimming Down the Stars. And I took that as a challenge. So somehow I had this vision in my head of what that would feel like, what that would look like. And I had the tune right away. It goes, So some tunes are an attempt to capture a mood. Sometimes it's in celebration of an anniversary or birthday, and some of my waltzes are also songs. Anything else? Yes, I did want to mention very quickly that Lynn heard me playing a new waltz once and said, I'm going to write a song to that called Pathways of Pine Woods. I'm not sure what it was about that tune that inspired her, but when she came back, I recorded it for her. She came back with these lyrics, and she created the story about a person who comes to Pine Woods as a small child, comes back to Pine Woods at various times, meets her husband working in the dining hall, eventually brings her grandchildren. And when I read these lyrics, I was just choked up. It was just so touching. And dear old Saul Weber he loved that song, and he would perform it at Pine Woods. So I knew Lynn was a fine writer. I didn't know she was a lyricist as well, but that was another collaboration. So I think maybe we can move on to whatever else I have here.
Great. Yeah, that was wonderful. I was waiting for that tune. It sounded so lovely, but maybe in the after talk. All right, we're going to move on to thing number 5. It's a good one. Words and music. Okay. Something that we've all been hearing from him lately.
Hopefully I can get through all of this. So as I've mentioned, writing songs was one of my main creative outlets as a child. Now, as I began to focus on becoming a professional musician, that songwriting faded into the background. But now I've come full circle, and I'm much better known for writing songs and song parodies than for English country dance. I actually spend more time doing that sort of thing now. I should say in the last 4 years, there was a lot of inspiration to come up with satirical songs. My first song parody um, came out in 1974. This was during the Watergate hearings. I had a job playing um, at a kind of Dixieland club playing piano. And so I wrote Bye Bye Nixon to the tune of Bye Bye Blackbird. And I'll play a little bit of that. Pack up all. Oh, yeah, this was not only the Watergate hearings, but the energy crisis. So, pack up all your White House tapes, lock the office, close the drapes. Bye bye, Nixon. Though you said gas was running low, your mouth keeps up a steady flow. Bye bye, Nixon. So that was one of my first attempts at that particular genre. Now, at the BSO, I began writing tribute songs for musicians when they retired, when they would have a special reception for them, using well-known classical tunes and pop tunes. And so this kind of got me back into writing lyrics again. And I already mentioned the song, the parody that I did during the strike. So it seemed like the wheels were starting to turn. At Buffalo Gap in 1997, John Crumb was on staff. I heard his beautiful rounds. To me, rounds were like row, row, row your boat. And I didn't know there could be such art to the round. So that inspired me to start writing rounds, and I have done quite a few over the years. And as I went along, I discovered my snarky, satirical tendencies. And since this is the historic tea and dance society, I will, of course, have to sing you a little bit of the tea shanty. Some folks fancy oolong tea, others like Earl Grey. I'm quite fond of chamomile with its delicate floral bouquet. And it's sip me hearty, sip me boys, raise your pinkies high. Stir it up with a silver spoon and drink that porcelain dry. So politics and current events provide a wealth of material to satirize, and especially recently. Social media has made it possible to share songs instantly with a potentially unlimited audience. Another genre I got into was when my daughter was in the children's chorus of Maryland, and hearing, how lovely a children's chorus could sound, and hearing some of the repertoire, I set a couple of poems to music for children's chorus and got them published. Also was hired to write lyrics. A Russian friend of mine had written some songs for children in Russian, and I had to you can't actually literally translate lyrics from one language to another and sing them and expect them to come out with the scan and the rhyme. So I had to refigure, come up with tell the same story with different in a different way. So that was an interesting challenge. Over time, I've written some ballads about true events. The first one was about my father, an experience he had in World War II, getting shot down when he was flying a B-17. There's also the story of the 4 chaplains of World War II, very moving story that I recommend you look into. I wrote a ballad about that, and a ballad about the doomed Robert Scott Antarctic expedition of 2011. Also about the sinking of the Pride of Baltimore. It kind of sounds like I'm drawn to tragedy here, but there is something about certain tragic events that resonate. We can all relate to just the humanity, the struggle, and it seems like you're guaranteed to write something that's going to be moving. So I find myself drawn to these kinds of stories, and I find they make effective ballads. Something quite different. Sharon Green, some years ago, sent me a bit of her little light verses, And I was immediately inspired to set those to music in a kind of a Sir Arthur Sullivan style. I'm going to do a little bit of one called Zoology Test. Oh, do you know the crocodile bird that picks at the crocodile's teeth? Picks at the molars from up above and the cuspids from underneath. Oh, do you know the little tick bird that picks at the buffalo's hide? Pecks at the ticks that stick so fast and gobbles them down inside. So this is a song about symbiosis, and I just love her verse, and I'm hoping that we'll get to do some more songs like this. William Donald Schaefer, who was the mayor of Baltimore and governor of Maryland, a larger-than-life political character, died in 2011, and there were all kinds of tributes to him and retellings of his life story, and that inspired me to write a musical about his life called "Do It Now," which was one of his pet phrases. And this is, I have to say, my magnum opus. This is like 20 songs. It would take a whole session in itself to tell the story of how this musical came about. But I will just mention that it was supposed to have been produced this past summer. And of course, it got canceled with everything else. So I hope that can be put back on the boards next summer if things come back to normal. So there's a few other songs that you may have heard was the Spread the Joy. Spread the joy, pass it on, lay it blossom in our children when we're gone. It's a song for the 100th anniversary of CDSS. And more recently, I wrote a song for Baltimore Folk Music Society 45th anniversary, which also extols the joy of the various dancing and musical forms that we enjoy. So and since YouTube and social media, I've had an outlet for posting songs, and unexpectedly, one of these songs absolutely took off like a rocket and went viral. This was in 2018 when the Space Force was announced. And I remember not only was the Space Force something that we needed militarily, but it would bring American values into space. I thought this was, the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. So I made up this silly little ditty. I got some costume shop paraphernalia and and made this video of the Space Force theme, put it on Facebook, and within a week it had 1 million views. So I think we're going to hear that one now.
Blast off with the Space Force, the protectors of the planets and the stars. Blast off with the Space Force, bringing virtue and morality to Jupiter and Mars. Who cares about the billions that we're spending? The Milky Way is surely worth defending. We're the almighty USA, so you'd better get out of the way of the Space Force. Hooray!
So that was a bit of silliness that I had no idea. It touched a chord, I guess. Sometimes it's like being in the right place at the right time. And this is like one of the best investments I ever made. I think it was the helmet. It might have been the space helmet that made it take off. So I know I will continue writing songs and song parodies. Maybe I can ease off a little bit. It's never going to get normal. There's always going to be things, all kinds of dastardly doings in DC and elsewhere that I'm going to have to skewer in some way or another. So I'll continue writing songs. But what I really wish I could be doing is playing music for dancing and seeing all of you and being part of this wonderful world that has taken me in. So this is something that I look forward to very much whenever things can go back to normal. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue doing whatever creative things pop into my head and sharing them on Facebook and YouTube. You can look me up on YouTube, Jonathan Jensen, and I have a lot of funny songs there. And so I'm sure that that's going to continue, and as well as the dance tunes, and someday the dances.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for bringing us so much joy with your music. And we did post a link to your YouTube channel, so people can go there and check out all of your tunes. And speaking of tunes, with dancers, I like to say, "What's your favorite dance?" But with a musician, I like to say, "What's your favorite tune? What tune brings you joy when you play it?"
Oh, I'd say of the older tunes, the old classics, this one that I never get tired of playing is Mr. Isaac's Maggot. I'm not sure what it is. It's got four parts, so there's a lot of variety. It just goes to such nice places, and watching the dance, especially when the whole everyone on the floor advances, that's just a wonderful moment. And I'd always look up at that point, and that's one of those tunes that's just a classic. Of the newer tunes, I'm very fond of the tune Kruskalls. Is it what is it? Tom Kruskalls. Is that the something about that? It has this beautiful flow to it, and it has a range of only of an like it's barely an octave, and it just when it and the B part, finally you get to that high note. That's just such a beautiful arrival point, and that's a dance that it works beautifully as an English country dance tune. I don't think it was written to be that, and it doesn't necessarily sound like one, but it's it's like I wish I could write that. That's just a different style. I admire tunes. Another one is Watley Watley Barn. Um, that note right there. That's like something from a Torch song. You don't expect that in a country dance tune. I think that's just genius.
Oh, yeah, and you picked such wonderful tunes. And we're going to talk more about this in the after talk. And I know some of you had questions and you wrote in questions. We're going to get to those in the after talk. But for now, I'm going to move us along to the tag end of this show and say thank you, Jonathan, for being on our Five Things show. It's been wonderful. It's been hard to stop you because it's been so many great stories and tales. And I know there's going to be more in the after talk. So we are posting that link. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to my Five Things team, Lindsay Verbal in the background, Reed Wilson on Zoom, and Larry Hansen on Facebook, and along with our helpers, Kara King and Linda Nelson. Thank you to Colin Hume for maintaining an accessible index of all our web chats on his website in one place. So please go there and check out our list of now 37 plus this one, Five Things web chats we have done over the last 8 months. I can't believe it's been 8 months. And a big thank you to all of you folks who have been sending in donations to our group, the Historical Tea and Dance Society. It's very appreciated. There are operational expenses, and thank you. Thank you for your support and all the wonderful words of how much you appreciate the show. We really appreciate that. Coming up next week, let me tell you, you guys have been asking for it for a long time. Jenny Beer, she said she would finally come on, and we have her next week. And then coming up on Saturday, November 21st, our third Saturday, instead of a Five Things, we're actually doing a lecture, a really fascinating lecture with Susan DeGuardiola. So we're posting links for that. If you feel like dropping into tea time Thursdays at 5 p.m., send us a note or drop into our Facebook group, Historical Tea and Dance Friends. just before that time, and you'll find a link there. Don't forget, this weekend is Fall Frolic, and a lot of us are going to be there having a lot of fun frolicking with the Bay Area. So for donations, Jonathan recommends you check out the Country Dance and Song Society freelancers page. Send the love to freelancers and choose somebody there to support, and possibly consider supporting his local Baltimore Folk Music Society. We're posting that in the end. I'm not even going to tell you what this closing music is. I will tell you this, though. It is the Historical Tea and Dance Society's probably very top favorite dance and song. There is not a ball or big events that we do not dance this, and we are posting the tune and the composer and the credits. We'll see you all in 2 minutes. I can't wait to continue on and hear more. So thank you everyone. It's been a wonderful night. Bye.